Hi, I'm Lorraine McGregor, CEO of Spirit West Management.
And I'm Marc Stoiber, and I'm a fractional revenue architect. And this is the Growth Show, where we unpack the invisible friction inside growing companies and the systems that unlock momentum when everything else stalls.
We have a fabulous guest today, Marnie Larson of On Actuate. She was the COO. Now she's also the Chief Revenue Officer. So she's taking on two absolutely critical missions for a growing company. And our topic today is, why do we tend to blame one department when sales stall, and particularly sales? The two things should go hand in hand. If the company's growth has stalled, it must be sales' fault, right? What do you notice having crossed the divide between several silos?
Yes, it is the tendency certainly to blame sales and to think that it's the skill of the salespeople on that team. I think the general attitude is that is like a silo. It's a standalone, and the reality is we should be all selling across the organization. All of operations is selling all the time, right? And they're helping in that sales cycle. And there's no work if there's no sales. So participation and understanding of what sales does is crucial.
Are you saying that a business is actually a team sport, not a just all sales all the time?
Surprisingly, yes. Yes, it is a team sport. Absolutely. And, I've spent my career in technology specifically. And technology is interesting, right? Because there's usually, a founder or a technical team that gets really, really excited about solutions, right? And fancy tech and cool things that they create. And there's a tendency to think everyone wants that cool thing. But when you're selling into business specifically, it's about the problems that you solve for those businesses. And unless you can equate those two, sales is going to have an issue with that. You can't just say, "Hey, here's sales guy, here's a really cool thing." People are going to love it, right? It has to come with a value proposition. Why should I care about this in my business? Why does it make my life easier? And that messaging has to, kind of come from the market itself, right? So
You could
solving
pitch
problems
me another feature and that should solve my problem, right?
yeah, and why then you can point to all the failed implementations out there of solutions across the board, right? If that was it, then everyone would love their systems. Everyone would love their ERPs and their HR and payroll systems. And that's not the case, right? Because they're being positioned a little bit, well, a lot
Mm-hmm.
incorrectly sometimes.
Give us an example of where we're missing the boat on talking about the features and what people are actually needing from their software systems and what you discover because you have to implement these software systems. Where's the
Yeah,
disconnect?
Yeah, I think it's in those discussions, those understanding consultation with the client about what the real problems are. And it's not that the clients completely understand that either. So, today things have changed, right? It used to be if you were selling software 30 years ago, the sales guy was the person that you went to and got your information and learned, right? You learned from them about product and what it can do for you. And nowadays everyone goes onto Google and they search it and they decide what's going to fix their problem, and then they ask for that. So they've gone way down the road of solutioning themselves. But they're
Mm-hmm.
not the experts in those solutions, and they don't understand those product sets extensively. So they're missing opportunity. There's other ways to do things. There's more than one ways to solve a problem. There's better ways to solve problems than what they figured out. But they set that expectation, and then they measure you against that in a sales cycle and say, "Oh, hey, we're not buying you because you can't do this thing," right? So we're already kind of on our back foot because we have to then say, "Let's have a bigger discussion and really talk about what problem you're trying to solve." And that's where, that it takes longer. It's difficult to kind of come off your position and what you've been thinking, but that's what's needed. And that is a pretty highly skilled position to have, right? If you're going in and saying, I'm going to be a consultant and talk about your problems and really solution with you, that's not just anybody, right?
Are you
That
saying that you want your salespeople to be able to ask those critical questions that peel back these assumptions that customers now have? Do you take that sales
ideally,
responsibility?
ideally, it would be great if you could find salespeople that were that consultative, right? That would be great if you could find that. I think that's a pretty rare breed. I think if you get consultant or get sales people that have that kind of skill, you're lucky. I think that you have to put in systems in place so that you can get that salesperson down the road significantly and then supplement them with functional consultants that understand the product and the problems that we can tackle with that product. So it does mean some pair up of resources, and that's where everyone in the organization has to get involved, right? That can't be kind of an off the side of your desk thing. That's a pretty important role. If you're way down in the sales cycle and it's your job to come in and help sales, you need to be pretty skilled at that and know what you're doing.
And do you think today's typical hunter sales profile would agree to work in that kind of collaborative team environment where they've got a piece of the process, but not ownership and control over all the process?
I think that those that are good at their job and have evolved as the market has evolved recognizes that you have to be paired with people that really understand problems and product and how to mirror, and marry those. I think sales still assumes and in most cases do own a good portion of the sales process itself and the outcome of that. But a lot of them do recognize that they can't go to that low of a level and do that on every single opportunity that they happen to be working, right? I think the risk is that true hunters are going to bring back a lot, and they're going to bring back a lot of things that might not fit. So if you have someone out there in front doing that, you're going to have to like wade through a lot more opportunities and figure out what is the best fit. But I do think that good salespeople have recognized the need to supplement.
So
Interesting.
paint a picture for me. When this is working, when you have the hunters paired up with functional consultants earlier, what does that look like?
Yeah, that is the line we walk when we're running it from an operations perspective, because the functional people that you pair up are valuable people. They do the work of the organization. They're the ones that are actively working on projects, that are working with clients every day. They're valuable and they're billable, for the most part, or can be billable. So the line we walk from a sales ops perspective is we need to have sales take it as far as they can and then bring in that functional person at the right time. If they start on day one with the sales person in initial calls and things like that, it's too early, and we are going to burn too many hours on those functional consultants, right? So that's the job of sales ops and leadership, is to figure out when you go in at that lower level. And then that means your hire on the sales side, your salesperson, does have to have a certain amount of skill to get partially down that road, right? So that we know that it's a good opportunity and it's time to bring that other person in. I don't agree with the on day one they go in together. I don't agree with that. I think we have to get down the road and then we pair them up.
I think it's pretty insightful, or with farsight of you to consider that what you're doing in the sales process is introducing the prospect to the consultant, who is likely going to be the one they're going to work with later on. So they get a taste test of what it's like to work with on Actuate and their people in implementing the software. And that, can be very helpful, I imagine.
It is helpful. And, the buyer has got a lot more savvy with all the knowledge. And so it's not uncommon for a buyer now to ask that they meet the functional consultants in the sales cycle. So certainly by the time we get to product demonstration and presentation stage, they would like to see at least some of the functional consultants, right? So I think if you do a good job of bringing them in at the right time and exposing them to the client, it does do a lot to build up the confidence of your client that you know what you're talking about.
So
Is there? Oh, go ahead.
I was just okay. We're looking at the idea of not blaming sales for when growth stalls. But what you're talking about is a different way to operate as a sales environment and a sales team. What other things have you had to do an overhaul on to get the results that you want, which is the whole business growing to the next level?
Yeah, I think it's a coordination activity across the organization. So sales touches all areas. So when you're talking about putting salespeople out there to find clients, talk to clients, you also have to coordinate all of the marketing activity and the collateral to support that, so that you can get them a decent way down the road on their own, right? So they need info sheets, and they need case studies, and they need product placement and messaging that makes sense for them to get them far enough down the road. So marketing has to be coordinated in on that. And then you have to coordinate with delivery and sales enablement as well when they get further down in the process, and we need those consultants or we need those proposals written. It all has to align. So it's not like standing in a line together and all stepping forward. I see that sales traverses the entire organization. And if you do think it's a silo, that's where you start to just churn through salespeople, right? Because they're never going to measure up, but you're also not giving them all the tools to do the best. And I'm not saying that, sales people, there aren't bad salespeople or salespeople that don't get it. That does happen. And there will be some churn. It's a pretty high turnover role. But if you don't arm them with what they need to talk to people and get initial discussions and get down that road, it's a waste of your time. You're spending a lot of money on these people.
So I remember, since we've known each other a long time, sorry, Marc, I'm not letting you ask your question, that there was a constant sadness, pressure, never finding the right salespeople. And so what you're saying is, when you used to have a different view of what sales should be and what it needs to be, now you actually find more good candidates. Is that the case, or am I missing that?
Yeah, no, I think you're right in that regard. But I also think that how sales is viewed does come top down, right? So if you have, founder leader that appreciates sales, that makes a difference, right? If you have a founder that is all about the product and all about technology and thinks that sales is just this necessary thing that has to happen so you can still build stuff, that makes it harder on sales, right? And much harder to live up to those expectations, right? So yeah, I think it's a top down, culture in the organization. I mean, you have to, and I see this in a lot of service organizations, is that those that bill get judged on being billable, right? And so if you say, hey, stop what you're doing and help me make this sale, now all of a sudden what they get rated on is affected, right? So unless you have a top down attitude that sales is all of our job, we all have to participate in this, and it will be recognized that you participated. And so that's not just bench time, non-billable time, that's value add time to the organization. People aren't going to help you, right? They'll dance around it. They'll avoid it, right? You get what you reward, right? We all know that in business. You get the behavior that you reward. So if it's not top down, it's not going to work.
It seems to me that there's a complexity here, getting everybody to play in the sandbox. I worked in brand building and marketing, and I worked with really big companies and sales didn't talk to marketing. And it's a bit of a joke. And
Yeah.
these were smart people who were trained, and they were trained to build the systems that would get marketing to talk to sales. I, for one, think that sales is my secret weapon because they get the feedback directly from customers on what they like and what they don't like. And that should be the mother lode of information that marketing uses to build better communication. But they don't. And from small to large, systems versus talent. You're a company looking to acquire or invest in a tech company. Is there a sign there that they've got the system? Is there something that you can identify, or is this still kind of instinctive for a lot of companies?
No, I do see it as process, and I see it as process that you can define and track, right? And we've got great technology now to handle that, right? We can take all of this information and it gets loaded into a CRM, and we can report out of that. We can use, there's AI tools you can use to report on the trends and where leads are coming from and how far we're getting and why we're getting rejected or why we don't go for things. So there's a ton of data that we can actually scrape from these systems to let us know. But you're absolutely right. The data comes from the market. So, if a proposal is out there and we work it all the way through and then we don't get selected, we want to know why, right? And that information comes from that client. Why was it? Was it price? Was it not a fit? Did you not like the presentation? What was it? So that we can feed that back into our systems, right? So I do think that you can create the coordination in the process, which is, really what my job is to do, is to get everyone to move together to actually achieve a goal. So once we as an organization decide these are the markets we're going for, and then we get the research, the feedback, this is the problems we're trying to solve in those markets, then everything we do is geared around that. And we have to work together on that. I find that, yeah, it seems odd to not have marketing and sales linked and actually oversight by the same leadership, right? Because they go hand in hand. Like
I know,
you
but
can't.
is it your experience too that the common sense isn't common practice?
Yeah, I think, yeah, well, yeah. And I think that, when you're a growing company at varying sizes, your attention is pulled in different ways, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever is on fire is what gets the attention. And sometimes things like marketing, and that seems to be like, well, when we can afford it, we can do it, right? And, Lorraine and I've had lots of talks about this, about spending on marketing for the sake of spending. It doesn't work unless you've done the work to figure out who you're talking to and what you're trying to help them with. Marketing, is going to be ineffectual for you. So I think there's a little bit of where you are in your growth cycle and how big you are and how much you can invest in different business functions kind of separately so that you can move ahead. There's a bit of that too.
Mm-hmm.
We also see, since Rob, my partner, does the research on where conflict lives in the B2B sales chain. And it's a lot of, if you've got siloed operations, there's a lot of perception of threat that when, sales doesn't appreciate marketing, marketing doesn't appreciate sales, and that just keeps generating conflict. So my question for you, Marnie, is how rare do you think it is that other companies, not yours, have coordinated the entire company to support the sales effort? I think that's rare, but maybe you, being in the tech world,
Yeah.
can see
Yeah.
that.
I mean, it's interesting because I think there's probably a certain size and stage of your kind of evolution where, maybe they work better in conjunction, because you can see it on some of the really big companies too, that marketing gets quite siloed separately from sales, right? So that coordination, I think you're right. I think if you look like broadly across all sized organizations, there's probably not that many that necessarily do that extraordinarily well. I think that it's, known that it makes sense and you should, but I think in practice it becomes harder because again, you're judged on a certain, like sales is judged on making their numbers, and and marketing has
Mm-hmm.
different KPIs that might not tie back to that. So you're going to get what you reward and what behavior people are trying to get recognized for, right?
Did you have to change your compensation or your incentive system in order to inspire coordination and break down the silos where in your business?
We haven't done that yet. No, we haven't done that yet. Where marketing and sales enablement is necessarily tied to it. I think that it is all kind of wound together. So if you start to do well, if sales has got the tools they need, they're going to generate more interest and leads, which is going to translate to better stats on marketing and likes and views and impressions and all of that sort of thing. So I do think that they are tied together, right? That's why I don't see the separation, right? Because the behavior of one does affect the results of the other.
Well, and I guess it's up to the C-suite to recognize and report on the value of the coordination, not just
Correct.
how sales did.
Correct. Yes.
So
Yeah.
so is this something that can be replaced by robots? Is this person who pulls them together and cracks heads and says, "You got to talk to each other"? Is that a robot, or will it ever be a robot?
And, I don't think it's a robot. I hope it's never a robot. I think that that's where, we can do well, where we show our skill, right? And the strategy and the management of people and the read of the different, kind of cultural aspects in your organization, right? Um, so, I do think that's where the heavy lift on the thinking comes in, is how do you coordinate this, and how do you get people to move in the same direction and to agree with what you say. I don't see that being easy to replicate with technology.
Mm-hmm.
I hope not. I think that's where we all play.
Um, a story I'd love to hear. I mean, we've been talking very on the theme, but I would love to hear a story where you went in and turned things around, where there was dysfunction. I've worked with lots of sales coaches, and the stories are legion. With sales not talking to marketing and blaming each other. And I'm curious, if I was walking into a company, what story would you tell me where I go, "Oh, this sounds like Marnie's story"? Do you have you got any
Yeah.
good ones?
I think that, like, in general, when I look at when I come in to take over, or to review how teams are working, I tend to play to people's strengths first. That's the first thing I. So if I look at a sales team and I say, hey, there's some great people that are good at prospecting, and then this person is great at closing, and this person understands the strategy of the deal, and to play to those strengths and utilize them that way, instead of expecting that one person can be all of those things. And that would translate to any team if you look at it from, sales enablement, or, like when they're writing proposals and doing pricing, and, like everybody has something that they're better at than other skills. And if we tend to think that, if you're a sales person, then you should be able to do all of this top to bottom, 100%. No, it's going to be a lot harder. So I would say that, if anything, the better results that I've seen have come from meeting people where they're best utilized, trying them in those kind of functions first. And if you get good results, they're great, right? You know where your gaps are, you know where you can fill in, and then you can start to build out a team around those people. I think that we all have that tendency to think we should improve what we're not great at, and but really the best results come from concentrating people on what they're really great at, and let somebody else do the stuff that they're really great at, and the combination from a team perspective gets you results.
Well, the Gallup organization has certainly nailed that
Yeah.
equation. Yeah, when we recognize each other for their strengths, not for the title they wear.
That's right.
Yep. The
That's
specific
right. Yeah.
things. We're doing that with a company right now of 5 types of different leaders, and that the current CEO is only seeing the drivers, not seeing the stabilizers and the strategists and the quality people,
Execution.
and
Yeah,
yeah, the
exactly.
execution. And
Exactly.
so we can all wear a sales hat and come at it from a different angle, uh, and and provide value,
Yes.
contribution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
think the takeaway for me in what we're talking about, especially if you're, a private equity backed company, that today the problems that the customer experiences sound quite different from, the list of features and all the attributes of a platform, and what they're looking for. They think they already have found. So you can't keep selling to them the same way that we have in the past.
Correct. Yeah.
and and how to modernize your whole organization is to make it, a team sport.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that we've all evolved as technology has, and as the access to information has grown so significantly, right? That your buyer is more sophisticated in a lot of ways and still lacking knowledge in a lot of ways too. So that's a tough read, right? Because you've got people that do think they have the answer that you're trying to sell to, and you've got to work around it to get back to what the original problem is that you're trying to solve, so that you can show them more than one solution to it.
Yeah. I imagine if they think they already know what they want, they're going to be fairly set in their ways, somewhat defensive, maybe resistant to new information. That's a lot of headwind to try and speak into and open the
Yes.
door.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah, and I've spent most of my career in public sector, and you're working around a massive procurement process as well, right? And I think that I really have issue a lot of times with the procurement process that gets put in place, and the necessity for these massive RFPs, and then they get consultants to help with those, which can be good sometimes, but not always. And to ask the right questions, and then really get up to the root of what they think they, or what they actually need. So to get around what they think they need is tough, right? And then you're working in this process where they won't let you talk to anybody because you're in a buy situation, right? So I find that extra difficult to get around, and I haven't seen that process change much in the time that I've been, my career in 30 years. I am still dealing with the same kind of procurement and RFP processes in public sector that existed in the 90s. So that has not evolved, and it needs to evolve.
So, no, there's a fascinating insight. Don't expect your customer to change their processes. You have to change yours in order to win an open
Mhm.
mind and an audience that's willing to consider
Yeah.
something other than what they're locked into.
Yeah, which
Well,
is the goal of getting in before, right? Getting in and understanding, your clients and your prospects before they enter those processes, because once they're in it, and they've made a call. And in some cases they already know what system they want to select, but they're going to run this whole process to get to that end result, right?
it's funny
So,
because
really,
oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Because one of the things I always talk about is shiny objects, because we can make it more efficient by bringing in shiny objects. I remember working with a company that worked in heavy equipment sales, and successful company. And their sales was one guy walking around with a pad of paper taking orders. And you're going, oh, I wonder if we could improve on this. And the bottleneck they had was that he was retiring.
Right. Yeah.
So that was the bottleneck. That there was one guy with a pad of paper going around to distributors around North America taking orders, and he was sales. And they wondered how they're going to get around this. I'm going, wow, that's the opposite of what you see in most tech companies, where you go, they're so distracted chasing shiny things they can't focus on the fundamentals. It sounds what you're describing, that some folks are stuck in the 80s. They're very far from shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the processes are, and how they move to purchase is stuck, and decades ago, but they do get distracted by shiny things, right? So they will put now the latest. I mean, have you seen a webinar without AI in the title? No, like that's the shiny object right now. AI is going to solve all your problems. It can do everything, right? And the reality is that most of the organizations that are asking for it haven't even done the base work to get them anywhere near being able to utilize that effectively, right? So they're still working on disparate systems, multiple databases. They don't even get good analytics and reports currently. So getting baseline automation would make their lives tremendously better, right? And whether that's AI driven or not, these things that have been around for decades could make their lives easier, but they want to jump from this kind of antiquated to this new thing without any of the in-between work. And so what happens? That new thing fails, right? They'll buy something, but it'll fail because the fundamentals aren't there. They don't have good data. They don't have single databases to drive off of. They don't understand their own processes. They haven't, streamlined anything internally. So the systems still fail for the same reasons the system failed 30 years ago. If you don't have your shop in order, a system doesn't fix it. It just streamlines or automates your bad process a little bit, right? So
It's just a tool. It's just a tool.
tool.
Humans
It is
still
not
have to
the
organize
answer.
the workflow.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
How work flows through your organization. If everyone did that work prior to buying systems, they would get much closer to what they want at the end of the day. But they're not doing that, right? They're looking at their processes going, oh, these don't work. Let's buy a system and then that will fix our processes.
Yes, I see that all the time in helping companies become saleable. They don't want to automate workflows. They want a tool to do it for them. And then they don't have an understanding of their internal operating system. We just talked about.
Exactly. And it's not easy, right? Like when you go in and look at your processes, it is not easy because you realize how subjective that your flow of work is and how it depends on certain people. And then there's a whole bunch of workarounds and shortcuts that people do. And if you're
Yes.
going to build that into a system, all of a sudden you restrict all of that and you take it all away. And so it seems worse, right? Yeah, it is. It's a tough switch over to get that mindset.
Very uncomfortable.
I want to switch gears just for a second here, because what we're talking about is the systems, the shiny objects, relying on one guy with a notepad. I'm a company who's going to invest in a company. Is there an audit that I can do with Marnie where I go, let's see, Lorraine, you talked about having a saleable company, intellectual property, see if there's systems in place, see if there's the right stuff, that they've got their ducks in a row, because people can say a lot, before you get started into due diligence. What would you look for in due diligence when you're walking into a company?
Well, I would look for how workflows, so the business process and how automated that is, which would equate to how scalable. So if you're going into, if an organization expects to grow exponentially and they don't have the systems to support that, right, that it's not going to happen. So I would look at how work flows and where it bottlenecks and understand that, right, before I would say, oh, you can be double or triple the size. I think it's a lot of organizations think you can throw people at it. Sales is one of those areas, right, where you think, well, if we made this many sales with 3 people, then we're going to make double that with 6 people. And that's not true. It's not true. If you don't have the processes and the backup and the people to support the sales process, you've just wasted your money, right? So I would look for how they've mapped and automated their work. And that's top to bottom. That's not just in any one function. It's from sales all the way through to delivery and then to support and customer success management and all of it.
Well, you're talking about having an intentional operating system. And the questions that I love to ask is, I'd ask the same question, but I'd ask it of each individual and see if I heard the same thing or different things. Because now I know if it's different, there isn't an intentional operating system and there's breaks all over the place, because we all know everybody reverts to their comfort zone. I'll do it this way because I like it doing it
That's
that
right.
way.
That's
Way
right.
better.
It's comfortable. Yeah, it's comfortable.
Comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Marnie, this has been incredible.
Yeah.
The takeaways that I'm really glad we got to, or when growth stalls, don't blame sales. Look at how the sales processes are coordinated across the company, how everybody interacts. You need an intentional operating system, because expecting your customer to change their stripes is only going to keep your sales low. You have to keep adapting to break through their own conclusions and assumptions about the problem they think they want to solve.
And a quick, easy check. What I got is the quick, easy check to see if this is a company with a problem. See if marketing knows sales names, and if sales knows marketing's names.
Yeah,
that's right.
And is your operating system intentional? And if it is, that should be giving you year-over-year growth in sales. And if it's not, well, there's a break in the system.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank
you. Really enjoyed your insights.
Truly appreciate it. And of course, we've got your links. Everybody will be able to reach out to you directly in the show notes.
Sure. Sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That worked really, really well.